Okay. In 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Jeff Frick here, coming to you from the home studio for another episode of Turn the Lens. And, you almost need a friend to help you get through this AI stuff. It's coming so fast and furious. So we've got something a little bit different for this edition of our AI adventure. So a friend of mine reached out and he asked me if I'd heard of this new thing called notebooklm.google.com. It's a Google Notebook AI tool. And, one of the challenges with, say, ChatGPT and some of the other tools is trying to get your own data in there. And there's things like RAG, and there's a lot of software ways that you can get your own data in there to make it more relevant to your own search. But as a non-coder, it doesn't work so well yet. I'm sure it will work better later. But this is an interesting twist on it, so definitely worth checking it out. So if you go to notebooklm.google.com, that's notebooklm.google.com, you can start loading it with documents. And, recently on the Jack Smith January 6th trial, he just released, I think it was, 1,300-page appendix, highly redacted, so there's lots of blank pages and pages with black, so it's really hard to get through the whole thing. So I thought, what I'll just do is I'll load the January 6th trial library into this machine and see what comes back. So here's what I loaded. I loaded the October 2nd filing. That was 165 pages, a PDF, and I'll put all the links in the notes below if you want to check these things out, or you can do whatever you want to load into yours. I put in this new October 18th appendix. That's 1,353 pages. And then I added the January 6th final report, which was 845 pages. So quick and dirty math, that's 2,000, close to 2,500 pages, thereabouts, 22, 23, 2,400, something like that. Into this thing. And then there's all types of things you can do once you've loaded your data into the system. And you can add YouTube videos, you can add all types of things. You can get an FAQ, you can get a study guide, you can get a table of contents, you can get a timeline, a briefing document, as I said, a summary, but you can start to also ask it questions, which is pretty cool. But another feature that it has, which I'd never seen before, and this is what I really want to experiment and share with you today, is you can actually generate a podcast. So it will generate a two-host or a host and a guest talking head podcast with the data that you loaded in. So with that said, I went ahead and generated a podcast. It's about a 15-minute conversation between a male and a female host. I wanted to share that with you today. I went ahead and used some of the Adobe tools to add a talking animation head. I don't play with animation very much, so I'm not very good at it, but since I play in video, it's nice to have something to look at while the audio plays. But this is a first generation cut. You'll notice there's a couple little hiccups here and there, but generally pretty amazing that you can take 2,500 pages of documentation, load it into this thing, and I think it took about 6 or 7, 8 minutes to generate this MP3, this file that I turned into a podcast. So without further ado, let me share the podcast of basically ingesting the January 6th trial information. Here it goes, about 15 minutes.
All right, so you're ready to unpack one of the most talked about days in recent history?
January 6th.
You got it. You sent over the January 6th report and some filings from Jack Smith's investigation. Looks like we're going for the full picture here.
Absolutely. And it's more than just the day itself.
Right. It's about understanding the strategy, the people, all those behind-the-scenes details.
Exactly. Those details are essential. This wasn't just a sudden eruption. It was a series of calculated choices. Take, for instance, the foundation of it all. The big lie, what the report calls it. This wasn't just Trump claiming victory.
It was planned.
Premeditated strategy. Planned well in advance.
Okay, so break this down. How could it be planned if nobody knew who was going to win?
Because it wasn't about who was going to win, but about controlling the narrative.
So, like, spin.
In a way, yes. See, the report reveals that Trump got advice, right? They told him that early election results might favor him.
Because of how votes were counted.
You got it. In-person votes tend to get counted faster than mail-in ballots, and those were heavily favored by Democratic voters in 2020.
Interesting. So there's this potential for an early lead that might not actually mean anything in the end.
Exactly. They even had a name for it, the Red Mirage, a potentially misleading early lead for Trump.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. So they knew about this red mirage.
And knowing that, they planned for Trump to immediately declare victory if he had any lead on election night, no matter how many votes were left to be counted.
Wow, that's bold.
To say the least. And we're not just speculating here. The report actually cites communications about this very scenario. Like, there's one from Tom Fitton, he was president of Judicial Watch back then, urging the White House to prepare for this exact thing.
So it was premeditated. This wasn't about accepting the results. It was about controlling the story before the full picture was even in.
And sowing doubt about the legitimacy of the process itself.
It's incredible how much planning went into this. And it wasn't just about controlling the story, was it? There was very real pressure, especially on some state officials.
Oh, absolutely. And the report really highlights that call between Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State, Raffensperger.
Chilling phone call.
Is it ever? Trump straight up pressured him to find enough votes to overturn Georgia's results, even implied Raffensperger could be in legal trouble if he didn't play ball.
Wow. Talk about an abuse of power. And it didn't stop with state officials either, right? The report also mentions Trump trying to use the Department of Justice, the DOJ.
Absolutely. Trying to get them to back his claims. Even considered replacing the Attorney General with someone who would, well,
Do his bidding.
Essentially. See, the Attorney General oversees the DOJ, and they investigate things like election fraud. If Trump could put someone loyal to him in that position,
That could have changed everything.
huge implications.
Wasn't Jeffrey Clark, a DOJ lawyer, involved in all this?
Yes. Clark was more than willing to go along with Trump's plan.
And what was the plan exactly?
Trump considered appointing him acting Attorney General because Clark was ready, no hesitation, to send this letter.
Letter to who?
Several states. And the letter urged them to basically ignore the legitimate election results.
Ignore the results. What would they look at instead?
These illegitimate slates of electors put forward by, you guessed it, the Trump campaign.
Wait, alternate electors? What is that, some kind of...
Imagine each state's electors, the people who officially cast votes for president based on the state's popular vote. These alternate electors were basically a group of Trump loyalists claiming falsely to be the legitimate electors.
Even though Biden had won those states.
Exactly. So you've got Trump trying to install people who'd back him, even if it meant undermining the entire election process.
It's unsettling how far this went. And then there's that tweet.
Be there will be wild.
I remember thinking at the time it was reckless, but I had no idea. The report directly connects that language to what happened on January 6th.
It wasn't just reckless, it was a spark to a powder keg, mobilizing extremist groups, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, who were key players in the violence that day.
And the report actually shows these groups were inspired by that tweet.
Directly. There's social media posts, messages where they specifically reference it as a call to action. Their green light to go to D.C.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just these groups, was it?
No. The report also shows how Trump's words motivated thousands of his supporters, people who were already convinced because of the big lie that the election was stolen.
It's just horrifying how it all played out. And then, amidst all that chaos, there are those 187 minutes that I think still haunt a lot of people.
The 187 minutes between the start of the riot and when Trump finally told his supporters to leave the Capitol.
187 minutes where he refused to act. His own vice president was being hunted by a mob and nothing. What was he even doing during that time? What did the report find?
Well, that's where things get especially interesting and very troubling. The report paints a picture of a president who was more focused on holding on to power than on actually protecting the nation. The report describes a scene just chaotic in the Oval Office during those 187 minutes.
So paint the picture for us. What's happening while the Capitol's under attack?
White House aides practically begging Trump to call off the mob to tell them to go home, members of Congress, even his own family, trying to get through to him frantically, and Trump glued to the television.
He's watching this happen.
Watching it unfold like it was some kind of spectacle put on just for him.
I can't even imagine. He's watching his supporters storm the Capitol, putting people's lives at risk, and he's
doing nothing. At least that's what the report details. And even when he does finally release that video message, tells the rioters to go home. Well, it's full of contradictions.
You mean the one where he tells them he loves them?
That's the one. Even as he's telling them to leave, he can't bring himself to condemn what they did. Calls them very special. Says he understands their anger. It's almost
Like
like
he's trying to appease them, even then.
almost. And get this, releasing that video. Not even his idea, at least not initially.
Really?
According to the report, it took a lot of back and forth, his advisors really pushing him. Can you imagine having to push a president to tell a violent mob to stay peaceful?
It's mind-blowing.
Mm.
It really makes you question his state of mind at that moment.
And what about Pence? During all this, he's in the Capitol, literally being evacuated. And Trump's nowhere to be found.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast. The report really highlights how Pence, facing this direct threat, he steps up, fulfills his duty.
His constitutional duty.
Right. He's in constant communication, military leaders, even giving orders.
To deploy the National Guard.
Yes. In Trump's absence, Pence is making sure the electoral votes can be counted, and the president is, totally derelict in his duty.
It's incredible. You've got the vice president, someone who is so loyal to Trump, basically having to become...
Being president.
It's like something out of a movie.
And that's what the report drives home. While the Capitol is under siege, elected officials fearing for their lives, the actual president of the United States is totally absent, not part of any decision-making. It really makes you question his understanding of the presidency, of the oath he swore to uphold.
Absolutely. The report also mentions something about Trump wanting to join the march to the Capitol himself.
Yeah, according to witnesses, he was insistent on it, even threw a tantrum when the Secret Service told him it was too dangerous.
Hold on. He wanted to be with the mob as they stormed the Capitol.
That's what multiple witnesses say, including a Secret Service agent. They claim he was furious when they told him he couldn't go.
But I thought I read that Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, denied that in his book.
Meadows claims Trump never intended to actually go to the Capitol, but the report directly contradicts that. The firsthand testimony of those who were there.
So why would Meadows?
Try to cover it up.
Yeah.
It's a good question. And this back and forth between Meadows' version and what others have said, it raises questions about his role in all of this. Unfortunately, we don't have all the answers. The report talks about how some key Republican lawmakers, Kevin McCarthy, for example, refused to comply, subpoenas and all that.
Stonewalling the investigation.
Essentially, and that obviously makes it harder to get to the full truth, to figure out the extent of the coordination between Trump and members of Congress in the lead up to January 6th.
So we've got Trump pushing the big lie, pressuring state officials, trying to put his own people in the DOJ, inciting his supporters with that tweet.
Yeah.
And then he's essentially missing in action for 187 minutes while the Capitol is under attack.
It's a lot.
It's starting to feel less like a spontaneous riot and more like...
An attempted coup.
Yeah.
And that gets to the core of what Jack Smith's investigation is looking at. Whether Trump's actions, his inaction during those 187 minutes, add up to a criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruct an official proceeding. Very serious charges.
And his court filings, they seem to be?
Building a case.
Yeah.
They do. One filing, for example, argues that Trump's pressure on Pence to overturn the election results, completely outside his authority as president.
And therefore...
Not protected. No presidential immunity for something like that.
Because what he was asking Pence to do was...
illegal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Smith, he cites all these legal experts who agree.
Yeah.
The vice president's role, counting those electoral votes, it's ceremonial. Pence had zero legal authority to reject electors to change the outcome. What Trump was proposing was, well, it was a coup.
But trying to make it sound legal.
Exactly.
So Trump was demanding that Pence violate the Constitution.
That's the argument. And the filings, they go even deeper, detailing the pressure on state officials, attempts to weaponize the DOJ, his role in inciting the riot itself.
It's a lot of evidence.
It is. But it's important to remember this is just what's been made public.
There could be more.
Oh, there's definitely more we haven't seen yet.
What about this scheme with the fake electors?
Ah, yes. The fake electors. Another tactic. The Trump campaign organized these groups, individuals in a few different states, all loyalists, to declare themselves the legitimate electors.
Even though Biden won those states.
You got it.
But how could they think that would actually work?
It was a long shot. Even some of Trump's own advisors thought so. The idea was to create chaos, disrupt the official count. They were banking on Pence, he was overseeing the count, to use these fake slates to justify rejecting the actual results.
So basically create enough confusion that
Yeah.
the election would have to be decided by.
Congress, potentially. declaring Trump the winner.
But they would have never.
Gone along with it.
Right. It seems far-fetched, even for
Trump.
Yeah.
It was dubious, legally and ethically, but it just shows you how desperate he was to hold on to power.
It's almost funny, in a way, if it weren't so terrifying.
Exactly. A blatant attempt to just toss out democracy, the will of the people. And it wasn't just about political gamesmanship either.
The money.
The money. The report goes into detail about how the Trump campaign, the RNC, they used these claims of election fraud, totally baseless, to raise millions of dollars.
From his own supporters.
Telling them they needed to fight back against a stolen election.
And then they used that money, too.
Among other things, paying off campaign debt, funding Trump's new PAC. Very little actually went to legitimate legal challenges.
So they were deceiving their own supporters.
For personal gain.
It's just appalling.
Let's shift gears a bit. The report also talks about foreign influence.
It does. And while it doesn't find any direct foreign interference in the election itself,
Okay.
it highlights how foreign actors, especially Russia,
They saw an opportunity. They saw the divisions, the tension, and they took it. Social media, online forums, even traditional media, they used it all.
to spread what exactly?
Misinformation, conspiracy theories, encourage violence, distrust.
They were watching us tear ourselves apart and decided to.
Throw gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
And it worked. They were able to make the big lie even bigger. Erode trust, push people further apart.
It really was the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Trump's lies, foreign interference, those extremist groups, and a whole lot of people who were.
Ready to believe the worst.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to those 187 minutes, a perfect illustration of how fragile our democracy really is. During those crucial moments, when you need a president to be a beacon of truth, a defender, there was nothing but a dangerous silence.
That's a lot, to really wrap your head around. The manipulation, the abuse of power, the violence. It's hard to believe this is the same country that's supposed to be this beacon of democracy.
And that's exactly why it's so important to understand it, what happened, how it happened, what it means going forward.
And that's where the January 6th report comes in, right? The special counsel, the court cases, it's all.
Essential, yeah. Pieces of the puzzle. And they're not just about holding people accountable.
Which is important, but...
Of course. But it's bigger than that. It's about having a historical record, about learning from this, and about protecting our democracy from happening again.
So it's about protecting ourselves, our institutions.
Yes. January 6th, it was a wake-up call. Democracy is not... Well, it's not a guarantee. It's not something we can just take for granted.
We have to.
We have to participate, be vigilant, defend it, especially against those who want to undermine it.
Against those who want to. Take it away.
Essentially, yes.
It's a reminder that our rights, our freedoms, they're...
Fragile.
Yeah. And that we can't stay silent, not when we see them being threatened.
And we can't let our leaders off the hook either. No matter their political party, their position, we have to demand more. Transparency, integrity, a commitment to,
Constitution. So after all of this, the evidence, the different arguments, what really stands out, what's the most important thing for people to understand about January 6th?
For me, it's realizing that this wasn't just a one-day thing. This riot, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It was the result of this long campaign to undermine our elections, create distrust, overturn the will of the people.
And that campaign, it didn't end on January 6th.
No, not really. The forces behind it are still out there, still trying to, chip away at our democracy.
That's pretty disheartening.
It's real, though. And it's why we can't just pretend it never happened. We have to learn. We have to be stronger, more vigilant. We have to protect the
ideals this country was founded on.
Exactly.
And that starts with?
Staying informed, talking to each other, being careful about what we believe, who we trust. We all have a role to play here.
We definitely covered a lot today. But it seems like this story, the story of January 6th, it's not over yet.
Not by a long shot.
More investigations, court cases, unanswered questions.
And those answers matter.
They do. But one thing's for sure, January 6th, it changed things. And it's going to continue to shape this country.
For years to come.
But what that looks like, well, that's up to us. Democracy, it's not a spectator sport.
You have to participate.
Be engaged. Stand up for what's right.
Never forget what happened.
And never stop fighting to protect our freedom.
Well said.
This was a heavy one. Thanks for diving into this with me.
Anytime.
All right, welcome back. Well, that is crazy. You know, as I've said, we don't have any clue how fast this thing is moving, and it's only going to move faster. Find a friend to help you on your AI journey. Get these tools, play with these tools, experiment with these tools. You know, you can do a lot of other things with the tools. I was asking it, you know, what are the pillars of the government's case in this trial, and it lists all the things. And then what's great is you can also ask for the references. So it will point back within that 2,500 pages as to where it pulled what references. So pretty amazing things. The AI journey is only going to get crazier, as has been said many, many times. There's massive amounts of capital being deployed here. There's massive new companies. Everyone is trying to integrate it both within their existing products as well as create brand new products. So it's something you want to try to stay on. You'll never get ahead of it, I don't think, but you at least need to try to stay with it so that you're not completely left in the dust as these new tools and basically infinite computing power delivered to your mobile phone is coming. And pretty crazy times. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for checking in. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Thanks for listening on the podcast. Take care.